Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay. You can just say yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Welcome back to Propaganda Loves You. This week, we're going to continue our, coverage of the Jeffrey Epstein document fallout and what's occurring there. Specifically, like last week, we talked mostly about what had occurred up to that point, what was leading to this. This week, we wanted to take a deeper dive on what the administration's done. We didn't get to part 3 last week. So we're definitely going to talk about that. Obviously, a lot happened between last week and this week. We had to vote in the House to release the Epstein files on the bill, and that immediately passed through the Senate, which I don't think anyone was kind of thinking that would happen, but it's been signed into law at this point. So, 30 days is what the Department of Justice has before they need to turn over these files to Congress. And so we'll go into the details there, why we think that flip occurred. Before we do that, there are a couple of other events that have happened this week that I think are worth talking about. One of them being Mamdani and his visit to the White House and kind of what occurred there. So I'm going to hit on that in a second. But I just have one quick trivia question for you guys before we get into that. I think you guys are aware that Marjorie Taylor Greene has decided to retire from Congress following some fallout from the Epstein debate. And she announced her resignation on Friday, November 21st, but she's leaving August on January 5th, 2026 is when she's actually resigning. So the question I have for you, and I'll give you three possible options here, is why is it that specific date? Why is she choosing that date to retire? Option A is to finish her term on the Oversight Committee. Option B is to wait for the special election cycle. And option C is to qualify for her federal pension. Which would you think is the possible?
Big. I would go federal pension for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I gotta agree.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's some other reasons, but that does just happen to be 2 days after she would qualify for her federal pension that AOC pointed that one out. So I think we can say that might be a reason why that specific date was picked. Okay, so I did want to just see what you guys' thoughts were on this Trump-Mamdani meeting. I've got a couple clips that I wanted to play, but I did think it was funny. It was billed as this huge socialism versus capitalism, or communism versus capitalism, or whatever you want to call it, on the internet, and then just turned out to be a session of Mamdani, I guess, just charming the shit out of Trump. I don't know if you guys had any initial thoughts before I play a couple clips from that, but yeah, I wanted to talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Just the guy charmed Trump right away, and then all of a sudden it was friendly and non-combative, and that's kind of alarming that all you need to do is pay the guy a few pleasantries and he's on your good side.
Yeah, basically that same take. I haven't actually seen much of the footage. I've just seen a little bit of that clip where they asked Mamdani if he still thinks Trump's a fascist or whatnot. That's literally the only piece of the interview I've seen, so I don't know what the whole thing is. I just know some hearsay about it. But yeah, it sounds like the classic Trump is very easy to manipulate narrative. That's why foreign evil people and everyone around the world who need something from him love him, because you can just say the right kind of thing to him and get him on your side, and then you get whatever you want. So that makes sense. Good on Mamdani for being shrewd in that way.
Yeah, definitely. So let me just play the clip really quick. So this is actually most of the whole interview. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I just want to play what Trump is saying about Mamdani, and this is the very beginning of the interview, and then I've got another piece here, but just want to start with this.
Congratulate. I think you're going to have hopefully a really great mayor. The better he does, the happier I am. I will say there's no difference in party. There's no difference in anything. And we're going to be helping him to make everybody's dream come true, having a strong and very safe New York. And congratulations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Please.
I appreciated the meeting with the president. And as he said, it was a productive meeting focused on a place of shared admiration and love, which is New York City, and the need to deliver affordability to New Yorkers, the 8.5 million people who call our city their home, who are struggling to afford life in the most expensive city in the United States of America. We spoke about rent. We spoke about groceries. We spoke about utilities. We spoke about the different ways in which people are being pushed out. And I appreciated the time with the president. I appreciated the conversation. Look forward to working together to deliver that affordability for New Yorkers.
Thank you very much.
So that's just the first clip, like after their meeting. And then I'll play the next one back to back, that we could just kind of talk through these real quick. This is probably the one that you'd seen the second part of, but I found the first part of this actually more interesting.
Just days ago, you referred to President Trump as a despot who betrayed the country. You said you'd be his worst nightmare and accused him of having a fascist agenda. Are you planning to retract any of these remarks in order to improve your relationship?
I think both President Trump and I, we are very clear about our positions and our views. And what I really appreciate about the president is that the meeting that we had focused not on places of disagreement, which there are many, and also focused on the shared purpose that we have in serving New Yorkers. And frankly, that is something that could transform the lives of the 8.5 million people who are currently struggling under a cost of living crisis, with 1 in 4 living in poverty. And the meeting came back again and again to what it could look like to lift those New Yorkers out of struggle and start to deliver them a city that they could do more than just struggle to afford it, but actually start to live in it.
And I've been called much worse than a despot, so it's not that insulting.
I want to clarify your answer to Stephen Nelson. He asked about your comment calling the president a fascist, and your answer was, both President Trump and I have been clear about our positions and our views. Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay. You can just say yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
So that was the couple clips there. There's a lot. I mean, the whole interview is kind of wild. Just how, what's the word I'm thinking of here? But I don't know how chummy, how buddy like Trump was with Mamdani the whole time. Like, it was very much like, I don't know, like that. I guess for the entire interview. But there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about between these two clips, that if there's anything else that you guys wanted to jump in on too. But the two things that I wanted to kind of explore a little bit. One is from that first clip. You know, Trump says something along the lines of like, you know, it doesn't matter what the party or whatnot, we're just trying to, like, you know, make things better, right, for the people in New York or something like that, which I thought was interesting. Like Trump, like, just saying parties don't matter. What I want to explore more with that comment is just, you know, Trump has actually enacted some policies that like Bernie Sanders agrees with taking stake in Intel, right? The reason I just found that funny and interesting was like, you've got a lot of people that kind of make their personality, their identity about hating liberals or hating socialists or whatnot. And I feel like Trump just has no actual ideological underpinning whatsoever other than himself, right? Like, so I just find that kind of like juxtaposition there. Like, I almost wonder if Trump would have gone like full communist or socialist if he thought that was more likely to get him into power, you know, like in the past, like if he thought that would have been the way to go. But so anyway, that is one thing I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on. And then the other is just Mamdani himself. Like, both of those clips I thought demonstrated a really good messaging on his part, like continuing, just take whatever it is, pivot back to what are the core issues of, you know, economy, what's the core issues of affordability, like not focusing on what it is that we disagree on or where the trouble spots are, not trying to create some sort of blow up in the Oval Office, just trying to focus on how do I actually serve the people of New York City? Like, how do I do that best, right? So those are kind of the two things. Like, what do you think of Mamdani, how he performed? And then what do you think about Trump and his ideological underpinnings or lack thereof based off of his comments here?
What was Trump's quote at the top? He said something to Mamdani about like, oh, there's no political lines or something, or there's no sides or something.
Yeah, let me play that back one more time just so we can get that one.
The better he does, the happier I am. I will say there's no difference in party. There's no difference in anything. And we're going to be helping him.
So no difference in party, no difference in anything. And we're going to be helping him. And congratulations to the mayor.
I guess like totally. I think you're totally right. He's on the side of money and power and probably would portray any sort of political ideology to get there. It kind of like, it makes me think of like, when I watch a sports game, sometimes I think about the two people, like take two quarterbacks or whatever, their pitch this rivals marketing team. They're like at each other's backyard, kids' birthday parties. They're all making like 40 mil a year and super happy and chummy. They're not actually combatants, you know? They're all on the side of money. So I think maybe he's hoping Mamdani goes that direction, even though it's really not likely.
You guys heard the term kayfabe before? Like, do you know what that is? Like, I'd recommend the 6-parter from Behind the Bastards on Vince McMahon is like super interesting, but it also like taught me a ton about wrestling and like kayfabe is like the short version is it's basically like the play that they put on for everybody else, right? Like the whole show that they're putting on, but they can't break character, right? And that's like kind of what that kayfabe is like you got to keep it going and whatnot. And almost like that for Trump, I feel like, you know, like he's got that, like this is all, you know, that's what his political identity is kind of just like that kayfabe, like fakeness that he has to put out there.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's like an element of that performance that is obvious at politics, especially at the national level. And Trump also has his background with Vince McMahon and WWE and all that stuff. I guess the main thing on my mind about this whole interaction and thinking about Trump and Mamdani as individuals comes back to something I think I've said before about Trump and how he is easily influenced and acts different in different situations. Him in front of Mamdani and the cameras and everything in the Oval Office is one thing. Him on his cell phone in his bedroom watching Fox News or watching News Nation or whatever is a totally different thing. And so his tweets are often a lot more erratic and unhinged than the version you get in front of the cameras. And I think for me, it comes back to this like philosophical murkiness around how an individual is made and how we kind of think of individuals as isolated units of identity, but we really exist relationally to each other. You know, a different version of ourselves comes out when we're around different people. And sometimes people are self-conscious about this and notice this and try to control it. Some people don't even realize it's happening, and you'll get people like mimicking someone else's accent unconsciously just because they're trying to relate to them in some way. And I think Trump is one of those people who doesn't have a whole lot of self-awareness and control over how his personality gets manipulated by the people around him. And especially what I thought was interesting about this encounter is how Donnie is like self-consciously using charisma to just make Trump feel comfortable and safe and heard. He's being a good listener, you know, he's being deferential in subtle ways to Trump that makes him feel like the top dog or whatever. And so he's letting Trump have those subtle personality markers within that room that make him feel comfortable and dominant and everything so that he lets his guard down and is more easily persuadable and just goes along with what he's saying. Mamdani is like, seems like the more self-conscious, self-aware person out of the two in the room. And so he's using his message discipline to pivot back to the issues he cares about without directly attacking in an aggressive way or whatever. But then when the reporter puts him in a corner at the end and is like, you said he was a fascist. Are you still saying that or not? And he's like trying to find some way to talk about it. And Trump's like, no, you can just say it. Mamdani very quietly is just like, yes. You know, he just like says it, but doesn't say it in a way he's like, yeah, fat, you know, he doesn't double down on it in a way that would be unskillful. I thought it was kind of impressive how he handled it because I'm sure there's a lot of pressure in that room for, you know, he's, I think around the same age as we are, like mid-30s, just became elected mayor of the biggest city in America. And like, it's a lot of pressure and everything. But the other thing I would say politically is that we should pay attention to how Mamdani himself governs in light of this idea of how you can be influenced by the people around you. The one thing that's sort of come out since all this started is that he intends to keep on, what's her name, Jessica Tisch, I think is her name. She's like the daughter of some billionaire who's the NYPD commissioner, big national security state type person. And a lot of people were kind of annoyed that Mamdani said he would keep her on. So that's like one concession he's already made to the national security state that people are like, oh, really? Why would you do that? So there's stuff with him as well in terms of how he's influenced by this new circle of power he's going to have to interact with all the time. So it'll be interesting to see what he delivers on based on what the campaign was about.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I like what I guess it just comes down to like what's possible versus what's campaignable too. Like, I mean, that's the realities, I guess, of like once you're like we're trying to work within that system, what you can actually get done will be interesting to watch for sure. I think the other thing that this kind of reminded me of was when Trump had his meeting with Zelensky, the one that blew up. If you guys remember that, like it just like blew up in the Oval, like while like Vance was there and stuff like that. I thought what they had said, I was trying to remember exactly what was said, but there was something along the lines of like he wasn't he was combative with Trump, or he wasn't being like, deferential enough with Trump and kind of like, kiss the ring sort of thing, which is what sent the meeting off the rails. And then thinking about that, and then the next time he showed up, like he put on a suit and just like charmed the shit out of him like the whole time. It was a completely different outcome that came out of that meeting. So yeah, I guess it just ties back into this. Like, I think that is a lesson that Mamdani probably took, and everyone else does as well, right? And to what you were saying before, it's like whoever talks to Trump last, and if they're charming enough, like he's going to come out with something good for them, at least for the next 24 hours, or at least until he forgets or talks to somebody else.
The other thing you mentioned right there at the beginning of your comment reminded me of something that Bernie Sanders had talked about a lot in the 2016, 2020 campaigns about what's campaignable versus what's possible, I think is what you said, right? Like how there's this negotiation between what we want ideally politically to happen versus what's actually possible given the reality of what's going on. And the point Bernie has always made that I think is pretty simple and I agree with is that whatever is possible in any given moment is only whatever the people in general are willing to go out in the streets and demand. Like if you can put an issue in the public conversation and then get 1 million people to show up and demand that it happen, it's a lot more likely that it'll happen than if you just put it in a conversation, but then there's no like grassroots mobilization or activation about it, right? You have to like get average people to publicly, vocally argue for that thing if you want it to happen. And so I guess that's where I always put it back is instead of looking at given the political players that are in power, what can I wheel and deal my way around to make happen in that world? That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is what kind of conversation can I get the people riled up about? What can I really start a public stir about and get people to fight for and demand? And I think that's the more populist, effective route. If he can get literally everybody in New York City talking about affordability and public transportation and all these things, and they never shut up about it, it's a lot more likely that something's going to happen about it regardless of who the political players involved are. I mean, the right-wing Italian government sent a military vessel to escort the Palestinian flotilla when they had no political interest in doing that. But there was a general strike in the country, and there was a lot of pressure for them to do something about it. And so that's, I guess, the main point that I come back to about what's politically possible.
Yeah, just on that note, like I was listening to Jon Stewart talking to, I think it was like the head of the DNC in his podcast. And he was talking about when he went down to do the burn pit legislation, and when he was like working, Jon Stewart was working in Congress a lot to get the legislation passed to fund all of like the medical issues that people were having that were exposed to burn pits, right? And he said that when he went down and they first started talking about the legislation, what he saw in a lot of those rooms was strategists negotiating against themselves before even putting what they want out there. They're like, well, that's not going to be obtainable, right? Like, so we can't, like, let's not do this, because they, like, without even like pushing it out there, right? Just thinking like this, there's no way this is going to work. Which, like, tying back to what you said, Joe, that's why I'm interested to see what Mamdani does, because like it's clear to me, at least, just from Trump, like, and what they've been able to do, like pushing things further to the right, like, you can accomplish more, right, if you don't like negotiate yourself into a box first, I guess, if that makes sense. And then to me, it's about the messaging piece. It's about like, is your pro propaganda better than whatever is going to be coming out against you in order to keep the public on your side, like you're saying. Are you tired of vast, confusing chaos of the open internet? Are you wasting valuable time navigating conflicting facts and redundant narratives?
Needed a simple answer for what to say in a debate, but the old encyclopedias gave me 6 different interpretations of history. I just want one certain truth.
Truth AI and Heritage Vault have solved the clutter crisis. We introduce the Unified Knowledge Index, a definitive digital resource that filters and finalizes all factual data.
It's true. Our system eliminates ambiguity. Utilizing our vast data from Heritage Vault Archive, the index ensures that every historical account, every scientific principle, and every civic fact is presented with 100% ideological certainty.
It's instantaneous. I type in a query and I get a clear, satisfying answer. No more footnotes or conflicting sources. I feel so much smarter and more certain about my beliefs.
We turn volatility into conviction. The Unified Knowledge Index guarantees that the truth you find today will be the same reliable truth you find tomorrow.
Truth AI. Knowledge without contradiction.
The Unified Knowledge Index is the sole arbiter of factual reality. Any internal skepticism or external contradiction may be classified as felony offense against civic harmony.
So jumping into kind of like one of our main topic for today, following up on the Epstein files release and everything that's been going on there. Last week, we talked about what was occurring, the timing of the shutdown, some of the files that had been released related to Jeffrey Epstein from the House Oversight Committee. And what's happened since then is we've had the vote last Tuesday in the House, like I mentioned, which passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which was forced by the discharge petition started by Thomas Massey, a Republican from Kentucky, and Ro Khanna, one of the Democratic representatives from California. And basically, once that passed the House, it went to the Senate. And I think Mike Johnson was saying like that there needed to be changes in the Senate before it was passed. And instead, I don't know what dealing went on in the back, but Schumer was able to bring this to the floor, basically pass as is, which did pass unanimously through the Senate. And it was signed into law by the president, I think, last Wednesday. What's interesting about this? I mean, the administration had been pushing back on this release, and Mike Johnson had basically kept it on the back burner for months and months and months. Like, they had to do the discharge position even to get a vote in the House in the first place, which, I mean, historically has not been a very successful, I guess, procedure in the past, but this time it actually worked out. And so the White House had done a bunch of different things, from bringing, I think, Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room to try and get her to take her signature off of the discharge position. So they're putting pressure on individual members of Congress to remove this, to try and stop it from coming out. And then once it became kind of clear, I think, that this was going to happen, Trump flipped like at the last moment and said everyone should vote for this. So like we should release this. And that's kind of the stance that they took after it was clear that this was kind of coming out. Since then, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of the ones that had been pushing this pretty hard from the right-hand side. And she basically said that she was getting now attacked by MAGA, which, I mean, I don't know if she is MAGA. So like, it's like she was, I don't know, she kicked out of the team, but being attacked, getting death threats from them over the push to have this done, which eventually is one of the reasons she said is leading to her resignation from Congress. Around the same time, a bunch of Democratic lawmakers put out a video basically calling for the military to not obey illegal orders, which Trump responded to, calling basically for the death of these lawmakers in seditious treason. So I want to show basically the clip that was actually put out by Senator Elissa Slotkin and other members of the Democratic caucus that were veterans, right? And so what they did, this was on November 18th that they put this out, and it was basically a call directly to the military and intelligence community to not obey illegal orders.
I'm Senator Elissa Slotkin.
Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris Deluzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow. I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
and the intelligence community
who take risks each day
to keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military,
but that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens like us. You all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution.
We know this is hard and that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
the Army,
or Navy,
Air Force,
your vigilance is critical.
And know that we have your back.
Because now, more than ever,
the American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws,
our Constitution, and who we are as Americans. Go, give up, don't give up, don't give up.
Don't give up the ship.
Crazy because Mark Kelly texted me last night to contribute to the campaign. It said, "Hey, this is Mark Kelly." So I don't know.
I couldn't help but notice that the Marine Corps wasn't in there. I guess like fuck the Marine Corps. They're just like, that's a lot. They're not gonna understand this message. Like, so.
I think they got Aaron Sorkin to direct that ad or something. All that music in the background.
Yeah, probably.
Watching The West Wing.
I don't really have a specific follow-up question for that. I was going to read an article and Trump's response to it. I guess the only thought I had related to that was just the wording in there. I mean, I think they alluded to like there's could be threats coming from internal to the country, but they didn't say like don't follow Trump's orders or don't follow this administration's orders. It would seem very clear to me like don't follow illegal orders, the way that was worded and talked about in there. But that's the only thing I wanted to really highlight. Joe, what were you thinking?
Well, I was just thinking about how complicated of a message that is, and like thinking about intended audiences for that ad, and like there's an explicit layer and then there's an implicit layer, and explicitly everything you're saying is true. It's directed towards service members. It's reiterating some basic fact they're supposed to be aware of, reminding them that they have the right to refuse illegal orders, which is a good thing to remind service members about because they do have the right to refuse illegal orders. The implicit message, I think, is what Trump is responding to, probably because it is low-key about him and his administration, and most people who watch the ad are aware of that. And so Trump is just ignoring the explicit part and pointing out the implicit part and coming back to that. But I also just wanted to maybe reflect for a minute about the position of service members who are like caught in the middle of all this and like watching the ads and confused about the orders they're getting and stuff. Because I don't know, can you imagine like being in a unit where basically everybody's on board with the mission, but then there's one dude who's just like meticulously, or person, I shouldn't gender it, one person who's like meticulously combing through the UCMJ and the Constitution and everything, and they're like, I don't know about this. This doesn't seem legal. I don't think we should do this. Like, what are that person's chances of success in that unit? You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to be there very long, I guess is my point. Just practically speaking, you technically have the legal right and the responsibility to refuse illegal orders. It's a huge responsibility to comprehend the law well enough to know when you're being given an illegal order versus a lawful order, and then having the confidence to speak up about it or to deny, or like, it's a huge thing to expect average service people. Most people are just going to fall in line, and that's what happens, and that's how militaries commit atrocities, because most people just fall in line. So I just wanted to appreciate how difficult of a situation that is for service members who maybe don't want to be in, maybe are ambivalent about their service, but they're in, and they're being told what to do in various situations, and it's morally and ethically and personally a really shitty situation to be in.
Yeah, and I was thinking that's also why you go and you fire all the inspector generals, right? And like get rid of like the top jags, and right, so that the people that are supposed to be interpreting and telling you if these are lawful orders or not, just get rid of them and replace them with your own people. But I do think like to your point there, Joe, too, this type of messaging I think is important because maybe there's that one person that's willing to stand up and like think about these things like you're talking about, and they're kind of isolated. And if this type of messaging wasn't coming out from Congress, they might be, but maybe with this type of messaging from former veterans and like, you know, Mark Kelly, I mean, I know a lot of people probably look up to him because he was like an astronaut and like, you know, a Navy like captain and all this stuff. So like having that almost creates like this permission structure for more people to question, in my mind, which I think is like what you said, exactly what Trump is responding to here. Like for sure. I want to read, you know, Trump's response to this, and then maybe we can talk about this a little bit as, do we think this is just standard Trump, or do we think the ramp up in rhetoric has to do with the Epstein files and the release there and more distraction? I'm going to read through this article really quick. This is from AP. The title of this is Trump says Democrats' message to military is seditious behavior punishable by death. This is written by Meg Kincard, and this was released on November 20th. President Donald Trump on Thursday accused half a dozen Democratic lawmakers of sedition punishable by death after the lawmakers, all veterans of the armed services and intelligence community, called on U.S. military members to uphold the Constitution and defy illegal orders. The 90-second video was first posted on Tuesday from Senator Elisa Slotkin's X account. In it, the 6 lawmakers, Slotkin, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, and Representatives Jason Crow, Chris DeLuzio, Maggie Goodlander, and Chrissy Houlihan, speak directly to U.S. service members whom Slotkin acknowledges are under enormous stress and pressure right now. The American people need you to stand up for our laws and constitution, Slotkin wrote in a post in the X post. Along with the Michigan senator, the other lawmakers appearing in the video are seen as possible future aspirants for higher office who now, thanks to the video's wide exposure, have elevated their own political profiles. Trump on Thursday reposted messages from others about the video, amplifying it with his own words. It marked another flashpoint in the political rhetoric that at times has been thematic in his administrations as well as among some of his MAGA base. Some Democrats accused him of acting like a king and trying to distract from the soon-to-be-released files about disgraced financier, sexual abuser Jeffrey Epstein. What the Democrats said in the video: with pieces of dialogue spliced together from different members, the lawmakers introduce themselves and their background. They go on to say the Trump administration is pitting our uniformed military against American citizens. They call for service members to refuse illegal orders and stand up for our laws. The lawmakers concluded the video by encouraging service members don't give up the ship, a War of 1812 era phrase attributed to a U.S. Navy captain's dying command to his crew. Although the lawmakers didn't mention specific circumstances in the video, its release comes as the Trump administration continues attempts at deployment of National Guard troops in U.S. cities for various roles, although some have been pulled back and others held up in court. Are U.S. troops allowed to disobey orders? Troops, especially uniformed commanders, have a specific obligation to reject an order that's unlawful if they make that determination. However, while commanders have military lawyers on their staff to consult with in helping make such determination, rank-and-file troops who are tasked with carrying out those orders are rarely in a similar position. Broad legal precedence holds that just following orders, colloquially known as the Nuremberg defense, as it was used unsuccessfully by senior Nazi officials to justify their actions under Adolf Hitler, doesn't absolve troops. However, the U.S. military code, known as the Uniform Code of Military Justice, or UCMJ, will punish troops for failing to follow an order should it turn out to be lawful. Troops can be criminally charged with Article 90 of the UCMJ, willfully disobeying a superior commissioned officer, and Article 92, failure to obey an order. How Trump and others responded. On Thursday, Trump reposted to social media an article about the video, adding his own commentary that it was really bad and dangerous to the country. Seditious behavior from terrorists, Trump went on, lock them up. He called for the lawmakers' arrest and trial, adding in a separate post that it was seditious behavior punishable by death. Trump also reposted more than a dozen comments from other accounts criticizing Democrats, including one that stated, "Hang them, George Washington would." Asked during a White House briefing on Thursday about the intent of Trump's messages, Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt instead honed in on the Democrats' message, which she posited perhaps is punishable by law. Leavitt went on to say that any incitement to defy the chain of command, not to follow lawful orders, is a very dangerous thing for a sitting member of Congress to do, and they should be held accountable. And that's what the president wants to see. So this is Leavitt actually responding to some questions related to this.
This morning, President Trump accused 6 Democratic lawmakers of seditious behavior punishable by death. Just to be clear, does the president want to execute members of Congress?
No. Let's be clear about what the president is responding to, because many in this room want to talk about the president's response, but not what brought the president to responding in this way. You have sitting members of the United States Congress who conspired together to orchestrate a video message to members of the United States military, to active duty service members, to members of the national security apparatus, encouraging them to defy the president's lawful orders. The sanctity of our military rests on the chain of command. And if that chain of command is broken, it can lead to people getting killed. It can lead to chaos, and to suggest and encourage that active duty service members defy the chain of command is a very dangerous thing for sitting members of Congress to do. And they should be held accountable. And that's what the president wants to see. If this were Republican members of Congress who were encouraging members of the military and members of our United States government to defy orders from the president and from the chain of command, this entire room would be up in arms. But instead, it is the other way around. And I think that's quite telling.
That's Leavitt's Levitt's response. There were a couple things in there that I thought was interesting. We could respond to that first if you guys have anything that you want to talk about there. One thing that stuck out to me was, I don't know if you guys remember, but back when people were being removed from the military for refusing COVID vaccines, there was definitely a lot of support for them to refuse these orders. And just like, I don't know, like I don't want to get into a whole like vaccine thing, but like in the military, you're forced to take so many vaccines constantly. Like it's just like every single year you get so many shots. It's just ridiculous that this one thing. But anyway, that was one thing that I thought was kind of like telling there. But then just Levitt's like she like just completely ignored the entire unlawful order thing and just saying no, they're lawful orders from Trump that they're telling them to ignore. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that before I finish out this article here?
Classic Republican victim blaming, I guess, when you just completely ignore the response or whatever and try to focus on what caused it rather than the response, which Levitt always does. She is a great propaganda mouthpiece. And even last week, she supported calling another woman piggy. So it's like, why listen to these people? If they've kicked out anybody credible, there's like maybe one credible reporter left there. And I just would rather not give them the time of day. It's sad that they're like the mouthpiece that we have to get squawking from.
It's funny you mentioned the piggy comment, because I think what she said was like, that's just President Trump being truthful and forward, and you should be happy about the transparency. But as soon as he says he wants to go like sentence Democratic lawmakers to death, no, that's not what he meant.
A good point. That's good.
So Democrats were swift to react to Trump's words, with Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer warning in a floor speech that the president was lighting a match in a country soaked with political gasoline. Speaker Mike Johnson said he did not believe Trump was calling for violence in the social media posts, saying Trump was merely defining a crime and calling the Democrats' video wildly inappropriate. What crime is he defining? Think of the threat that is to our national security and what it means for our institution, Johnson added. Trump's allies balked at the video. On Wednesday on Fox News, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller called the messaging insurrection, plainly, directly, without question, and said it represented a general call for rebellion from the CIA and armed services of the United States by Democratic lawmakers. On X, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth commented on the video Tuesday as Stage 4 TDS, referring to Trump deranged syndrome, a term used by Trump to describe voters so angry and opposed to him that they are incapable of seeing any good that he does in what he does. The Steady State, which describes itself as a network of 300-plus national and homeland security experts standing for strong and principled policy, rule of law, and democracy, wrote in a Substack post on Thursday that the lawmakers' call was only a restatement of what every officer enlisted service member already knows. Illegal orders can and should be refused. This is not a political opinion, it's doctrine. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell challenged the theory that illegal orders were being issued. Our military follows orders and our civilians give legal orders. Parnell told the Associated Press on Tuesday, "We love the Constitution. These politicians are out of their minds." So that's been the response so far to this video. Do we think this is more just Trump just saying whatever comes to his mind at the 3 a.m. after he sees something, responding to news, or deliberate distraction from the ongoing crisis that he's got going with the Epstein files? Or both.
Maybe I want to slightly amend what I said about Trump earlier in terms of him like just being easily influenced by his environment and stuff. I still think that's true. But I think on another level, maybe he's a pretty sensitive, I want to call it a vibe detector. You can just kind of get a vibe on someone and know whether they're against your interest or for your interest or whatever. You can just kind of feel the animosity sometimes. I think, yeah, in the video they made, that was obviously, an implicit attack on his authority. And from his point of view, he's not confused about what the underlying message was. And so that's exactly what he's responding to, because that's what he picks up on.
I would agree with that, but I also wonder too, like, is it somewhat of an admission here with everything that's been going down in the Caribbean boat strikes and everything, like it's the legal ground for those is shaky, and the admiral that was in charge of this left, like resigned because of it, right? That's a lot's coming out because like saying that the legality of these strikes are being questioned globally, not like just what's going on in the US, right? So I also wonder that too, right? Like they know that they're on shaky legal ground here for a lot of these orders that they're doing. So I don't know if it is inadvertent admission or just, again, anything that seems like a challenge to authority and power that he's got, like he's going to just push back on as hard as he can.
Yeah, the legal stuff, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of messy. There are some people, I'm sure, in the administration who are really concerned about domestic law and international law and things like that. The administration itself and large aggressive militaries like the US or like Israel don't really give a shit about international law most of the time. Like, they're all too happy just to ignore international law, even when the ICC is issuing arrest warrants and stuff, or it's like, don't care. It's really like comes back to this whole dawn of everything thing and different ways to dominate people. But the sovereignty, the monopoly on absolute violence is like the strongest way to dominate people. And when you have a military like the US military, you're not afraid of anyone else's legal authority. You can do what you want as long as you have that support. And so I think the threat Trump feels is that they're directly coming for that support that he needs to be, immune from whatever consequences might come his way.
So it's like he views these all as legal until he loses. It's almost the same comment that you made about like just popular support for policies and what you can get approved, right? Like if he loses that support, then that's when it becomes illegal in his mind.
Let's be honest. The problem with laws is that they punish ambition. Are you an entrepreneur, a risk taker, or a civic leader being held back by a technicality?
The old system was exhausting. I accidentally violated a trade agreement. My lawyer said that it would take 2 years and a public apology. I told him, I don't have time for moral grandstanding. I needed a clean exit.
Deceive America PAC understands that your time is capital. Why subject yourself to the unpredictable justice market? For a direct, non-negotiable fee, you secure a real presidential pardon, streamlining your career and clearing all civil or consumer liabilities from your record.
We eliminate friction. Forget the paperwork and the public relations crisis. We convert your financial liquidity into immediate legal immunity.
The best part? Now I qualify for a second pardon discount. It's incredible financial planning. Now I view compliance violations as just a manageable cost of doing business.
We turn your regrettable errors into an exclusive display of privilege. Why manage consequences when you can simply purchase a clean slate?
Secure your freedom today. Call the Executive Amnesty Line. Deceive America PAC, the fastest pardon money can buy.
The Executive Amnesty Line assumes no liability for the subsequent actions of repeat customers as their continued financial contribution demonstrates adequate repentance.
I guess the last thing I want to mention here before we close out on the fallout of the Epstein vote and whatnot. We mentioned it earlier, but Marjorie Taylor Greene did acknowledge that mentioned that she is leaving. She's going to be resigning from Congress. I think the quote was, she said she refuses to be a battered wife, hoping that it all goes away and gets better, talking about her loyalty to the president as one-sided. And basically, as soon as she kept pushing for the Epstein release, that's when Trump went on the offensive and was saying, like, she's, a liberal, she's a terrible person. And Greene actually had to get security or more security because she was receiving threats, death threats and whatnot, which I just found, interesting that, that happens as soon as she goes against the president. And, she's been probably one of the top, I don't know if hated is the right word, but one of the top Republican lawmakers over the last, 6 years or so that has been, I mean, hated is probably the right word for like the Democratic side or whatnot. But it's only as soon as she comes out against the Republicans that she actually needs to go get security and starts receiving death threats. I just thought that was an interesting thing to mention there. But yeah, I think that's the big things for this that I wanted to mention here. But Joe, I know we've got another article that we want to kind of read through possibly on this topic.
Yeah, we could. Well, this Ken Klippenstein article, I put the link in the chat. It's kind of short, but it's just a different perspective on the video that those Democratic lawmakers released. So the one side that we explored was how Trump responded in a very stereotypically fascist way at this threat against his power from the Democratic lawmakers. That's one way to look at what this video was about and what the purpose of it was. But Ken Klippenstein here gives us a different take on some of the political intentions, I guess, from the Democratic lawmakers who made this video. So I'm just going to read through this real quick. It's called National Security Moms Are Here. Trump's call for arresting Democrats targets new political bloc. And this is also November 20th, 2025. Seditious behavior punishable by death, Trump bellowed on social media today in one of his headline-grabbing attacks on Democrats that obscures a more important issue, the rise of the national security moms. Ever since Abigail Spanberger and Mickey Sherrill won their, is it Mickey or Mikey?
I think it's Mikey.
Mikey? Okay, I'll go with that. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. Ever since Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill won their governor seats, the next generation of Democrats have declared a multi-front war against the party old guard. Yes, but also the populist wave embodied by Zohran Mamdani, Spanberger, a former CIA officer, and Sherrill, a former Navy helicopter pilot, embody the national security, state alum turned politician that the Democratic Party has come to see as its salvation. Seen as the alternative to the anti-establishment Mamdani types, they're cast as a return to sober, responsible, and, most importantly, predictable leadership. Other Democrats in this mold, Senators Elissa Slotkin, former CIA, and Mark Kelly, former Navy, as well as Representatives Jason Crow, former Army, Chris DeLuzio, former Navy, Maggie Goodlander, former Navy, and Chrissy Houlihan, former Air Force, circulated a video this week urging their colleagues in the military and intelligence community to resist any unlawful orders coming down from the Trump administration. Set to soaring West Wing-style music, the video featured these members of Congress rattling off their national security credentials before issuing a solemn call for American troops to uphold the Constitution. I won't read. This is a quote from the video I'm not going to read because we just listened to it a few minutes ago. Trump responded by calling for the members to be arrested and put on trial. Their words cannot be allowed to stand, Trump said in a post on social media. We won't have a country anymore. An example must be set, President DJT. The incident is the highest profile moment yet for the national security moms, a term that appeared in a Democratic Party press release this summer. In August, the Democratic Governors Association issued a post to its website titled The Year of the National Security Mom. While acknowledging that national security isn't a top policy concern for voters, the post went on to argue that national security experience signals qualities that could bring the party back to power. Quote from the post says, Ms. Spanberger and Ms. Sherrill stand as an emerging model of leader, one whose experience combines maternal nurturing with who's your daddy badassery in a way that confounds partisan molds, the post says. It goes on to say, Spanberger posits that for voters sizing her up, her work at the CIA can serve as a shortcut to she's tough, she's hardworking, she's thorough, unquote. The post declared then candidates for Governor Spanberger and Sherrill are the next generation of leadership, a phrase echoed by Democratic Party leaders throughout and since the election. Before the November elections, when asked if Zohran Mamdani was the future of the Democratic Party, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries simply said no. Asked about Mamdani earlier this month, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell replied, quote, I'm going to focus on the election of Abigail Spanberger, who is clearly a moderate, as is Mikey Sherrill. Both women have strong military and national intelligence backgrounds, unquote. When asked after the election if Mamdani was now the soul of the Democratic Parties, Jeffries further said that that title belonged to Spanberger and Sherrill. Spanberger made clear her disdain for Mamdani when she asserted he wasn't a Democrat, a puzzling remark given that he had won the Democratic nomination. The national security moms have emerged as an alternative to the populist wave as well as successors to the old guard. Internal Democratic talking points produced in response to Trump's call for them to be arrested, leaked to me from a source close to the national security moms, provide some insight into their mindset. Put simply, it's an obsession with policies and procedures, citing the Manual for Courts Martial and Defense Department's Law of War manual to make the point that what they said was accurate and legal. And then they quotes from that document 2 bullet points. What does the law say? The Manual for Courts Martial says a military order is lawful, quote, unless it is contrary to the Constitution, the laws of the United States, or lawful superior orders, or for some other reason is beyond the authority of the official issuing it. The manual states further that the inference of being a lawful order does not apply to a patently illegal order, such as one that directs the commission of a crime. Another bullet point says the DoD Law of War manual states that members of the armed forces must refuse to comply with clearly illegal orders or to commit law of war violations. It also states each member of the armed services has a duty 1, to comply with the law of war in good faith, and 2, to refuse to comply with clearly illegal orders to commit violations of the law of war, unquote. And Ken Klippenstein continues, this edge-of-your-seat reading is what they want the future of politics to look like, a process-obsessed snooze fest that might make sense for a legal briefing but not talking points for the general public. What's more, it's doubtful that many see the endless wars this group of politicians served in as having enhanced our national security. That's what also makes the declaration of war by the national security moms such a losing strategy if it is intended to be the rebranding of the next generation and the path to 2028. It isn't about any meaningful definition of national security, that is, making the country safer. It's about qualifications to run, about process and the rules, about sticking with the possible rather than the desirable, a low-risk and low-collateral damage version of politics that people don't seem to be looking for right now. It promises stability rather than change. I've already written about Mamdani's own salute to national security and keeping on NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch, and about how the full release of the Epstein files will get steamrolled by national security concerns. Today's war is national security versus the people, plain and simple. So that is Ken's take on this video by the Democratic lawmakers, and I think it might be worth just exploring for a minute strategically within the Democratic Party, thinking about it as a complex tent with multiple factions, this tension between the national security moderates on the one hand and the Zoran Mamdani populist types on the other hand, and if there's anything productive for us to say about that tension strategically on the left.
My initial thought, they actually talked about this a little bit at CrookedCon. I'm trying to remember which panel it was, and they've been putting those panels up on their thing too, so if people want to go and listen to those, you can. I think it was, I didn't catch this entire thing, but it was the campaign leads for, I think, Spanberg, Cheryl, like the two moderates down there. And so it was interesting because they were talking about exactly that. Like, how do you, like, this was part of like the big tent conversation of what the Democratic Party needs to be in order to push back against this. And it was like, you need to have space there for the Mamdanis and for the moderates, because in certain locations across the US, like, it's going to take a different type of candidate to win. And so like there needs to be space within the party for all of these things, which is funny because that goes kind of against what, you know, Jeffries like is saying, like, well, I don't know if it goes against what Jeffries is saying. He's saying like, you know, this is the future of the party. Well, yeah, I guess it does, because he's saying like the moderates are the future of the party. Like, these are the types of people that we want to lead the party. Whereas the message that seemed to be coming out of that panel anyway was the party doesn't need to go further left, or it doesn't need to go further center or towards the right. It needs to be able to encompass like all of these people on different sides. I think that's an interesting take from Klippenstein here, that the establishment wants these individuals to kind of be the face of the party moving forward. And I guess I don't know if that works to build the coalition that you need to push back against where we are right now, but that's my just initial thought.
Yeah, I think what struck me in that was, Hakeem Jeffries, supporter of Chuck Schumer and endorser of Chuck Schumer, having a job and remaining in charge and deferring to Chuck Schumer. So it's like, obviously these centrist moderates want the centrist moderates to rule the party. And if asked hey, who's going to be the future of the party? Well, how about these centrists that don't really get anything done? No, it's not the populists that want to spend your money and actually want to help people and have these social programs. The future of the party is like AOC, and like and Mamdani, if he could like become president, definitely. But it's also like, what's up with this American fetish to continue this bicameral system? Can we please chop it up? Can we have like 5 different parties? If the Republican Party like fractured back in the early 2000s or whatever, and it was like successful in creating the Tea Party, and that were like its own party, no way people would be voting for that shit. And like, same with, maybe a more Bernie friendly, the 2016 Bernie, not the 2020, bow down to Bernie, but the more left-wing parties. We need more parties, and we should be way more left.
Yeah, I just thought that this really gets at the crux of the strategic problem on the left, and if the Democratic Party is a mechanism for change or if it isn't. I tend to expect to be disappointed by whatever the big D Democratic Party does. Just as a rule at this point, maybe some lucky populist can win some seat. And I mean, you see with the example of Mamdani that it's only after overwhelming, like avalanche style public support that he receives over and over again that they finally, after many times of trying to stop him, will admit, okay, fine, he's our guy, I guess. We really wanted Andrew Cuomo, but he's our guy. This populist can win within the Democratic Party, but they have to fight tooth and nail and get a lot of public support on their side, whereas moderates are just like welcomed in with open arms, like, come on in, you're exactly what we're looking for. And I think what people are pointing to more and more is that centrist style of governance leads to, if you're familiar with the term Overton window, it leads to the window of possibility shifting further and further right. There's a mechanism, there's like a gear mechanism metaphor people use to describe how politics gets shifted further and further to the right, and how when you have a gear with different slots in it turning, it keeps going further to the right, and the Democratic Party function is to stop it every now and then from turning. Not to turn it back, but just to stop it. Let it click again, stop it. Let it click again, stop it. And that's kind of what the centrist Democratic Party strategy results in, is that Overton window just ticking further and further and further to the right. And we end up in fascism, which is where we're at now. So again, it comes back to this strategy of how do you get a lot of people mobilized. This is why the General Strike U.S. strategy focuses on getting 11.5 million people in writing committed to a general strike before they call for one, because you need that kind of pressure to make something like that successful. But just to your point, Arthur, about wanting a different kind of politics that's possible right now, as far as what do we do every 2 or 4 years if we're voting? Does it matter? What's the point? What are we trying to accomplish? I think fighting for something like ranked choice voting nationally would do a lot to undermine the two-party structure. Because if you get a ranked choice presidential election, you might end up with 2 Democratic candidates as a runoff, and there's not even a Republican in the picture. And then those 2 Democrats actually have to talk about their differences. And that's where the really interesting conversations will happen.
ExxonMobil will never let that happen, okay? It's a bicameral system.
They can't pay 5 parties. They can pay 2 parties, but paying 5 parties, that seems excessive. I did want to comment on this national security thought process or piece that Ken Klippenstein has here, because I don't know, it's a really weird spot, I think, or difficult spot for some to be in. And what I mean by that is, for people that work in the national security world or in the intelligence community or whatnot, in general, what they're looking at every single day is threats against the United States, legitimately. That's not making things up, right? Making up threats. I mean, sure, there are probably a lot of places that aren't looking at explicit threats and are just more intelligence gathering. But for a lot of those people, that's what they literally are looking at every day, is threats against the U.S. And so when that's all you're focusing on from a work perspective, then I think the same way that a cop that only deals with crime might see crime everywhere, or is trained to only see crime or deal with crime, that's what they see. Same thing with intelligence community people, that if that's all they're doing every day, that's the mindset that they're going to be thinking from. Whereas everyday Americans have no access to that information. They don't get the same briefings. They don't have that same view, I guess. And the part that I wouldn't say I'm struggling with, but the part that you're talking about, Joe, with the moderates that are coming from that world, they see those threats that are legitimate threats, but that also helps bolster kind of the fascist talking points, those same threats, and then they'll expand on that, right? Or make it even worse than the reality actually is. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a tough spot to be in when that's a tactic that's continually used by authoritarian regimes to make threats seem worse or more existential than they actually are. Does that make sense? I'm just saying it's a weird spot to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree from that point of view, from the national security worker, just the average worker in the intel community. It is a weird spot to be in, because you're right, it does kind of habituate your perspective to be constantly oriented to that national security mindset. I think as far as having a conversation about democracy and are we a democracy? What are we doing when we vote? What strategies should we get behind as a people and everything? That perspective of the national security worker represents maybe a few million people distributed across all the different sites. vast majority of people aren't thinking about that stuff. The hang up, to your point, is that you end up with something like NPSM 7, where they use the exact same rhetoric about national security threats, about terrorism, about extremist activity. And you can see how these otherwise normal activities that citizens would engage in, like protesting, like criticizing dominant ideologies like capitalism, racism, fascism, and colonialism. That's a very natural thing for people to do in this kind of situation. And yet the national security state is trying to re-narrate those behaviors as extremist, as outsider, as threats to national security. The question from outside the national security state becomes, what precisely do you mean by a threat to national security? That term national security, as well as adjacent terms like in the best interests of the U.S. interests, national interests, things like that, are often codes for some infrastructure that's critical to the government of the United States, but not necessarily relevant to average citizens, like military installations and intelligence gathering sites, or it's related to U.S. multinational corporations' interests in other regions. U.S. interests in the Middle East often mean oil or something like that. In South America, it might mean precious minerals needed for certain technologies. In the Philippines, it meant tin and rubber, like these different things you can trace. So I guess what I appreciate about the kind of reporting that Ken Klippenstein does on national security is it forces people to be more and more transparent about what they mean by national security threats. Some of these threats, like you're saying, are actual legitimate kind of threats that people should be concerned about, and that it's good that we have a workforce dedicated to doing something about. On the other hand, it's a huge umbrella term that's covered in secrecy and national state secrets and security clearances and all this stuff, and the public just is supposed to trust but not know about it. And that's the area that allows for a lot of shady shit to happen. So, yeah, I guess that's the whole take.
Well, and to that point, it's like the more that things like NSPM 7 happen, and the more that the national security apparatus that we have gets turned against the American people or becomes, or is used, like you're saying, like this broad brushstroke just to justify whatever action is taken. Like what Ken is talking about here, as far as what these people supposedly represent, like the secure, hardworking, blah, 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 like whatever credibility that might have bought you before is gone. And like, because now it's being used against American citizens. So saying like, oh, like I'm associated with this, like it's not going to be a positive thing very long, right? If it is even a positive thing for some people. But the other problem there is it genuinely makes the country less safe, because now you've got those legitimate threats that you're talking about. The people that were looking at those are probably being retasked to look at immigrants in America or something, right? It's like a double-edged sword there, and both edges are bad.
Yeah, just to tie a bow on that last thing you said about the strategy of like aligning yourself with national security and how that's not like as attractive as it used to be or whatever. I think that's kind of the point Ken is making, essentially strategically from the left, from the Democratic Party point of view. National security credentials are not what the people are looking for in their leaders. Yeah. You know, you can't just say, oh, I've got X and X amount of experience in the national security system, therefore you should vote for me and trust me. People don't trust that anymore. So you need to have other credentials you use to justify yourself as a political candidate, which usually means policies that people want, like affordable housing, public transportation, access to food and healthcare, things like that.
Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors. When you buy a home, you're not just picking out a house, you're choosing a community. When you go with Patriot, you're not just choosing a mortgage, you're investing in your new community.
I was looking for a mortgage that aligned with my values of building a future for my family that I could be proud of. I'm not giving my hard-earned money to a morally bankrupt secular bank.
That's why at Faith First Banking, we're proud to offer the Patriots Mortgage. It's more than just a loan, it's a promise that your business only funds moral, God-fearing businesses that are building a stronger, more unified nation.
With a Patriot Mortgage, you can rest easy knowing your money is supporting a foundation of true American values. From the schools that teach the right history to industries that are building a stronger defense. It's a Patriot's promise to your community.
I feel so much more secure now. My financial decisions are finally in alignment with my spiritual ones. It's a weight off my shoulders.
Get started on your journey to home ownership and spiritual security. Apply for a Patriots Mortgage today from Faith First Banking.
Faith First Banking. Your money, with our mission.
A former Campbell Soup Company employee is taking legal action against the food giant, and he's making some explosive allegations about one of its top executives. Good evening, and thanks for joining us at 6. I'm Ty Steele.
I'm Kimberly Gill. Those allegations are now at the center of a lawsuit claiming the company's vice president went on an hour-long tirade attacking the company's products and employees before taking aim at its customers.
And the former employee recorded it all. Eric Erickson shares that recording and what the company is saying about it.
We have shit for four people. Why are shit?
And that's just part of an over an hour-long rant, says former security analyst for Campbell's, Robert Garza of Monroe.
I don't buy Campbell's products barely anymore. So I don't think, now that I know what the it is, you really get a soup. I look at it and look at you, bioengineered meat. I don't want to eat a piece of chicken that came from a 3D printer, you?
The recording allegedly of Campbell's VP and Chief Information Security Officer Martin Bally.
He has no filter.
Bally, along with another supervisor and Campbell Soup Company, named in a lawsuit filed Thursday. The suit claiming Bally made racist remarks, admits to coming to work high, and Garza fired for coming forward.
What do you think about the things that he was saying?
Oh, just pure disgust.
Garza says he usually worked remotely for Campbell's headquarters based in Camden, New Jersey. But thinking he'd be discussing his salary with Bally, he says the recording taken in person at a restaurant.
They couldn't jump for the
Garza says he felt sick after the rant, deciding to go to his direct supervisor in January, keeping the recordings to himself.
He had never had any disciplinary action. They had never written him up for poor work performance.
Garza says no one at Campbell's ever followed up, and it's taken him 10 months to find a new job, calling the way the canned soup company handled it simply terrible.
They have a motto, like we treat you like family, here at Campbell's, come work for us, we treat our employees like family. That's not the case.
We did just receive a statement from Campbell's that says, quote, "If accurate, the comments in the recording are unacceptable. They do not reflect our values and the culture of our company. We are actively investigating this matter." We've also reached out directly to Martin Bally. Erica Erickson, Local 4.
Her with the soup at the end, like whoever made the choice in the producers meeting, be like, what if she just had like some soup in front of her? She was just eating at the end. Brilliant. I hope that guy got a raise, or girl, whoever.
That was so funny, so wild. Yeah, the soup thing reminded me of like Obama drinking water in Flint, Michigan. I remember that he went on to and he like drank the tap. The people were like, no. Big disappointing moment there, but I don't know. Wonder if. Yeah, do you think Campbell's were like, they ran it by Campbell's, like, hey, we're going to do this segment. It's pretty bad for you guys. Just letting you know. And they're like, as long as you eat our product, you can say whatever you want. And then they had to put that in there. That'd be funny.
I could totally see that. Yeah, that's definitely like a PR move for sure. Otherwise, why would you do that? I guess, where would that come from? But I guess I'm not surprised. It just reminded me of this, but it was like, actually it was the ExxonMobil executives, I think, Arthur, we're talking about like, how they had climate change research like back in the 80s and knew this was going on and still went and said, no, everything's fine. Like, it's just human made, like just like bullshit. And like, I don't know, the same thing where if this is how he really feels about the product that he's like a VP for, and yet, yeah, whatever else they're going to say, like in person, I don't know. And then the whole, we're family here. Like how many times do you hear that from a company and then like you start working for them and it's like, I don't know about that. I don't think that's so true anymore, but yeah.
Like a video.
I was just gonna say it's like the quintessential like Ford Pinto. You remember the Ford Pinto?
Yeah.
It just exploded.
Yeah.
It just exploded. And they knew, and they were like, cheaper just to pay for the lawsuits as they come individually than to do a recall and fix everything. Because it was very cheap to fix it, but technically they'd pay less in the lawsuit, so worth blowing people up in the meantime.
Reminds me of the have you all seen that like Monsanto video where somebody's like, it's like a Monsanto exec and he's like, I would drink a glass of Roundup right now. There's nothing wrong with it at all. And then, of course he doesn't touch it. Like, yeah. Millionaires don't eat the products that they give us. They don't go to the hospitals that they give us. They don't take the medicine they give us. There's nothing they're doing that, they live in a different class.
Hey, I don't know about that, Arthur. I saw a meme once and it had like a person on one side and it was pointing to their clothes and saying like, this is like a $6,000 shirt. And this is like, and then it had the billionaire on the right-hand side and it was like $50 Walmart clothes that he was wearing. So I'm pretty sure like if that's the case, then I'm not sure where all of these luxury brands and Bugattis are getting bought by, if that's how the millionaires and billionaires are living. But,
Forgot about that. Wasn't that part of Buffett's thing too? Like, oh, if you just drive this old beater from the 80s and never buy a new car and just work hard and save your money. I forgot about that whole kind of billionaires are just really frugal with their money and make really smart decisions. That's how they got there. They also had to live like thousands of years in order to make the amount of money that the average person makes at that rate. Like, oh, really? That doesn't make any sense.
just save your change, every couple, dollars into that savings account, put it into the Robinhood account. It'll be fine. You'll be there someday. Don't worry.
You were talking about all these different things that they do. They're not like us. They have different food. They have different infrastructure. They have different healthcare. They have different roads. Remember hearing about these underground tunnels? Elon's always talking about these stupid tunnels for everybody, but they already got them for rich people. They're just like really, really bougie toll roads underground where you avoid all the traffic. I think in California, I would have to look up something legitimate about that. Right now, it's just hearsay, but
Don't worry, those will be like the essential services roads in our new future, okay? Only ambulances are allowed to drive on them.
Did I ever tell you guys the story about the CVP that I worked for, like at a meeting? He was talking about, like, it was this, I can't remember it was just some all hands meeting. So the corporate vice president that was over my section or whatever was talking about his life a little bit. And he said something like, I'm just going to paraphrase, but he's getting into like the life lengthening, like how do you age extension and stuff like that. He's talking about how that's a thing that he started to get into. And it's like, okay, so that's how rich you have to get to those hobbies. Like I'm going to find a way to live till I'm 300 or something like that. But yeah, just a whole different mindset, I think, once you get that certain amount of money. So it's crazy. Your special roads comment made me think of that.
totally, it's a different world, man. Like it is really a different world that we are not living in. I just found a Medium article about those underground tunnels. What we had talked about earlier in the podcast this year about the bunker business. Like, you remember that conversation? Like, how was it $20 trillion or something globally on the bunker business?
Moats with fire or something. Like they have moats with whatever, and like big giant moats in front of their houses, but they can set them on fire. That's how scared they are of us.
That's nuts. Yeah, I haven't heard that one yet.
Versailles wouldn't have fallen if they had a moat of fire.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode this week. And then next week is going to be our 50th core episode. And so we're going to do a roundup, I think, next week of some of our favorite things that we've talked about so far and in the podcast. But yeah, Arthur, Joe, anything you guys want to plug or anything you guys want to mention before we hop out for the day?
Just thought about the vice president of Campbell's getting to like his bunker, and it's like stocked with Campbell's, and he just goes, fuck.
Join us next week for a wrap up, and join us Thursday for Dawn of Everything. Actually, but next week we'll wrap up Dawn of Everything too. So next week's going to be a lot of wrap ups. That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening and hanging out with us.
If you enjoy the show, help us spread the word. Leave a rating or review and share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think would get something out of these conversations.
Your ratings, reviews, and shares help this show grow, and the more people listening, the harder it is for propaganda to win.
So until next time,
stay aware, stay safe, and remember,
propaganda loves you.